We are going to be talking about cell specialization today. Unicellular organisms, or organisms that are made up of one cell, are tiny because there are limits to how large they can grow. One of the reasons involves diffusion and osmosis. These important processes work well only over short distances. For example, it takes an oxygen particle a fraction of a second to diffuse over a distance of 10 micrometers. To diffuse over a distance of 1 millimeter, it takes several minutes. So when we're thinking about the distances here, on our rulers, we have centimeters, and then the tiniest notches that are on our rulers are millimeters. So in order to go 1 millimeter, an oxygen particle takes several minutes. There are 1,000 micrometers in a millimeter. So if we think about that smallest piece on our ruler, if we broke it into 1,000 different pieces, that would be 1 micrometer. So when we're looking at different sized cells, we can see here we have a golden retriever dog, which is made up of billions of cells, and it is about 2,000 times taller than a single-celled paramecium, which is the picture on the right. This one here is a paramecium, and about 2,200 times as long. So when we think about how much bigger a dog is than a paramecium, it makes you sort of understand that there are no single-celled creatures the size of a dog or the size of an elephant because they need quite a few cells in order to make them that way. Multicellular organisms have specialized cells. Like all living things, unicellular organisms grow and develop. When they reach the limits of their size, such as the amoeba shown here, they reproduce. Amoebas do this by dividing into two. This division results into two smaller, identical copies of each organism. So this is what we call binary fission, and it's in an amoeba. So we have one amoeba, and you can see it starts to stretch out, and then you can see that it's really stretching, and our nucleus is starting to stretch into two, and you can tell that it's starting to break off. And then once our nucleus divides in two, and it divides equally, then the cytoplasm and all the other organelles inside of it will also divide in two, and we will end up with two amoeba at the end. Your cells in your body also reproduce this way. During cell division, one cell divides to become two fully functioning cells. Then each of the two cells divides into two more cells, and so on. This is how a multicellular human being is able to develop from a single cell. Cell reproduction does not stop after a baby is born. Every day, old cells die and new cells are created. That is how your body replaces the 50 billion or so skin cells that it naturally loses each day. Your body cells also reproduce to repair tissues that get damaged. For example, if you scrape your elbow, your skin cells reproduce to form new tissue. So our skin cells are constantly dividing, and this is actually a picture of two skin cells that are dividing under a microscope. And we are constantly shedding dead skin cells. So if you've ever been around in your house, and as long as you're not doing anything crazy like renovations, like Mrs. Taylor normally is, any of the dust that you see in your house is typically people's dead skin cells. There are other things in it, but a large portion is actually dead little pieces of your skin. So I have a video here, and we are going to watch it, and we are going to take a look at how actual kidney cells divide in two. You can see how it starts to pull that red nucleus apart, and then it creates two different spaces where it creates two different things there, different cells. All right. Oh, we already watched that. Let's go to the next slide. So this is another interesting video. I'm not actually going to play it here in this lesson because it is fairly long. I recommend that you watch it on a high speed if you can, but it actually shows a salamander that is growing from a single cell into a salamander. So I'll play just the beginning just so you kind of get an idea of how it progresses. And so it's under a microscope because obviously this starts out as a very, very small thing. And you can see here's our first single cell, and it divides into 2, and then we'll watch it divide into 4, and then it'll divide into 8. And so it goes through this whole process. It's 6 minutes long, so we're not going to watch it together in this video. But it does show you the progression of how one cell becomes a salamander, and it's actually very, very neat. So I recommend that you watch that after we go through this lesson because it was very interesting and I very much enjoyed it. So our skin cells can repair and reproduce because they are specialized for this function. You and most other multicellular organisms are made up of specialized cells. This means that there are various kinds of cells and each kind carries out a specific function or functions that are needed to support life. Each kind of cell has specific structures that enable it to carry out its functions. For example, the function of your red blood cells is to carry oxygen to all of the cells in your body. To do this, red blood cells often must travel through extremely small blood vessels. Their thin, flexible disc shape enables them to do that. So this is under a microscope of our red blood cells. You can see here that this section here is telling us that for every spot that I see this far, it's 2 micrometers. So if we think this section would fit 500 times in between that smallest unit on our ruler. So these are very, very, very small, but we've blown them up so that we can see what they look like. So that's a red blood cell, and its job is to carry oxygen to all the different parts of our bodies. Red blood cells do not reproduce to replace themselves in the way that skin cells do. When red blood cells mature into the shape shown to the right, so in the picture there, they lose their nucleus. Since the nucleus controls cell division, among other functions, remember the nucleus is kind of like the brain, it's the thing that gets everything going. Red blood cells cannot reproduce by dividing to make more of themselves. The only way that our body can make more red blood cells is by relying on specialized tissues in another body system. Most bones of the skeletal system contain a tissue called bone marrow, with specialized cells that make red blood cells. So our blood cells are actually created in our bone marrow, and then they are entered into the bloodstream. So this is another picture of a red blood cell, just a slightly different microscope, slightly different angle, but same general shape that you can see. Tissues in humans. In humans, as well as in other multicellular animals, similar cells group together to form tissues. There are 4 different tissue types in the human body. We have connective tissue, epithelial tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. Connective tissue supports other tissues and connects different parts of the body. So blood is a connective tissue, so our fat, that should say bones, cartilage, and tendons. So all those things are things that connect. So tendons are what help us bend our limbs. The cartilage is any of these soft bones. So think of all the stuff inside your nose or inside your ears. Those are not bones, that is cartilage. It's not solid. Then we have our bones, and then we have fat and blood. Epithelial tissue covers the surface of the body and the outside of your organs. So the skin and the linings of various passages inside your body are made up of epithelial tissue. Depending on its location, epithelial tissue may release or absorb substances to and from surroundings. So your body actually can absorb different things. If you think about, I know some of you color on your hands, that is actually absorbing the ink into your system. If you put hand lotion on, that is also absorbing into your skin, and it's going to help hydrate your skin. And so it can also release things. If you think about sweating, that is releasing moisture through your skin. Next, we have nervous tissue. Nervous tissue carries messages to and from various parts of the body. So your brain, your spinal cord, and your nerves are all made of nervous tissue. So these are the things that tell you that you're touching something, that something's touching you, whether something's hot or cold. It helps tell your different limbs to move. That is the role of nervous tissue. And last, we have muscle tissue. So muscle tissue allows your body to move. This tissue is specialized for contraction. Different muscle tissues pump blood through your body. So they push food through your intestines and they allow you to move the various structures in your body. So the muscles are what keeps anything moving. Anything in your body that is moving is done because of a muscle. Specialization means that the cells of a multicellular organism must work together to support their own lives, as well as the life of the whole individual. For example, the cells that make up the tissues of your liver rely on other organ systems to provide them with oxygen and nutrients by diffusion. So although the liver is a very important thing and we cannot live without our liver, we need other organ systems in order to keep our liver healthy. So based on these last several slides, there are some communicate questions that I would like you to answer in your book or on a Google Doc, your choice. So the first one is, why do cells that make up multicellular organisms need to reproduce? So why do our cells need to reproduce or create more of themselves? Number two, is a red blood cell more specialized than an amoeba, or is it an other way around? So to be specialized means that you have a very special or particular job. So we can have all sorts of teachers, but within the group of teachers, we can have specific social studies teachers and science teachers and math teachers. That would be a specialized. Number three, what are the advantages of having specialized cells? Are there any disadvantages? And explain your answer. And number four, identify the 4 types of tissue that make up the human body. So list the 4 types, and for each type of tissue, write 1 sentence that describes how it functions or how that type of tissue works. So these slides are in the Google Classroom. So you can look at them at a little bit slower or move forward and backwards as you need. The salamander video is also in there. I encourage you to watch it. If you have any questions, let me know.